All good.
Okay, hi. Nice to be able to speak to everybody and that so many people have logged on today. I think that's fantastic. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to share my screen with you and start from the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you in a little bit more detail about a personal kind of journey following on from Catherine's, and again also sort of trying to kind of contextualize that in the sorts of careers and backgrounds that you might be coming from, and giving you some kind of hope that you can do this and that there's a way forward, and also you know, some kind of tips along the way as Catherine has been touching on. So I'm a professor in clinical psychology at the University of Sussex, and also a consultant clinical psychologist and research fellow in Sussex Partnership NHS Foundation Trust. I don't know, do we know how many people are from the Southeast region? Are we mostly Southeast, or who've logged on today, or have we got people from across the country?
I think it's mostly Southeast, but a few people out of region, maybe a few people from London.
Yeah. Okay. So there's quite a kind of a good set of guidance for people from Southeast thinking about future research careers. So I suppose in terms of my background, I suppose over the course of the last kind of 15 years, or 20 years rather, I've taken up a number of the different roles that Catherine has been touching on. So I'm just going to kind of capture some of this. So I suppose in more of an academic role and a gradual progression into a clinical role. So I started academically in Sussex, actually, in the University of Sussex in psychology as an undergraduate back in 1992, which seems like an awfully long time ago now, and moved directly from that into a PhD at the Institute of Psychiatry in the neuropsychology of psychosis. And I suppose the reason I picked that particular area was that I was already starting to feel that although I was interested in research, what I wanted to do was something that was clinical and applied and mattered. So I spent 3.5 years doing my PhD in London in psychosis, and moved immediately from that into clinical psychology training. So the doctorate in clinical psychology also in the Institute of Psychiatry. And you know, the rationale at that time for moving from one to the other was that although I was interested in doing research and I liked the clinical application, I felt that I wasn't able to do as much with just the PhD training, and I really wanted to be able to apply and embed the work in clinical practice. So I then spent 3 years doing the clinical psychology training. I then spent the next 6 years mostly as a clinician. So I got most of my time was funded as a clinical psychologist. But what I did alongside this was to start to write up and publish some of my papers, to link in with. So I was in I had good opportunities being in a kind of quite research active organisation in London with SLAM and with the Institute of Psychiatry, and you know, we've got some really strong research organisations here in the Southeast as well, so Sussex Partnership being one of those. So I was able to join to co-supervise PhD in clinical psychology doctorates. I was able to join as a co-applicant on small small internal grants at that stage. And I think one of the important things I found was just, it's good to be able to make use of the opportunities that are available to you, and to kind of start small and build on things. So if you've got evidence that you've been able to secure even a small grant or a travel grant or something of that sort, it's starting to show that you're able to kind of reach out and show a little bit of initiative to bring some funding in. Right towards the end of that time, I had the opportunity to then be involved as a co-applicant on a programme grant with NIHR, and that was just towards the end of my time in London. So I think my tips at that stage would be, take opportunities that are available to you, be a bit flexible. So sometimes, you might be doing a piece of research in an area that's not kind of exactly linked to your kind of interests, but it's worth kind of just trying out and building a range of experiences and kind of being prepared to work at it. So a lot of this work was done whilst also being a kind of a 9-to-5 jobbing clinician, and sort of doing things kind of on top and kind of outside of that time to move forward. I then had this next phase of my career. So this was moving from being more of a clinician into more of a clinical academic. So I moved to Sussex in 2008 and spent the next 6 years working as an early intervention service clinician. But I kept on to a half day a week funded by the Institute of Psychiatry for the first year, negotiated with my clinical team so that I could carry on having a link into the programme grant. And that's another thing I would strongly advise, is if you do get opportunities to collaborate on things like that, to hold on to them. I think, one of my kind of in reflection things that I would have done differently is in my career would have been to hold on to a really good project when I was doing my PhD. So if you've got good links, then do hold on to them, do build them. So I think because of the work that I've been doing, kind of supervising doctoral students in London, I then had the opportunity to move into, and because of the programme grant, I had the opportunity to move into a part-time clinical research fellow role with the NHS. So I then got half-time as a fully as a clinician and half-time as a research fellow, and that provided a lot more opportunities to kind of publish more papers. I got a couple of small patient and public involvement RDS grants, and as I say, just even having small amounts of money, just sort of, it starts to kind of build a platform for the next level. So just keep thinking about kind of small grants. So from that, I was then able to secure a couple of RFPB bids. And at that stage, it's interesting, Catherine was saying that some of the kind of knockbacks initially were around kind of, not being kind of sufficiently prepared or kind of ready for kind of particular roles. So I suppose one of the ways that I've kind of tended to approach that is to bring in collaborators who can support in that role. So don't be afraid to put yourself as the principal investigator, but even be a little bit upfront about the fact that that you have less experience, but you're bringing in people who you've worked with previously, where you've got a good track record, who are going to support you in delivering that project. Because ultimately, people just want to have confidence that if they invest in some money, that they're going to be able to get the outcome that they're expecting. I'd also was then able to supervise more clinical psychology doctoral and PhD students. And as I say, the tips at this stage were, it was really important to be able to negotiate to continue to have research time. Really important also to be able to kind of learn from others and build on contacts and collaborate to kind of strengthen your application so that you can be seen as somebody who can take a project forward. Alongside this, I also set up the SPRIG, Sussex Psychosis Research Interest Group. And this is a really good opportunity, again, to kind of raise the profile of the work that you're doing, build partnerships with the public. And a big part of the work that I have been doing and continue to be interested in is to think about how we really apply what we're learning back into clinical practice, and to be really open and inclusive in the kind of, I suppose, the development of projects, also the dissemination of projects, and really thinking about when doing kind of projects, producing, I suppose, products and learning that's easily translatable into clinical practice. So the next stage was to move. So I've kind of gone from academic into clinician, into kind of back into clinical academic. And now the last few years I've been functioning in a much more clinical academic role. So from 2015 to 18, I moved into a full-time clinical research fellow post. I took on some roles within the university, so convening and teaching on a master's course in psychology and kind of clinical practice. And then since 2018, I've had a part-time university post as professor in clinical psychology. So I've also, during that time, been able to be co-applicant and site PI on a number of large multi-site sort of randomized controlled trials. And I think that's also really important because you get a lot of learning from how different groups of researchers do projects and do research. And so I've learned a lot from being part of very large randomized trials and national collaborations. That has also kind of enabled additional research bids to be successful. And you're also kind of building collaborators for the future. So some of the people who I'm working with on grants that I'm leading now are people who I met through being a co-applicant on another project. So I've now got kind of 50, well, I think more like sort of 60 plus papers now. And in the last couple of years, I've been successful in getting a project that was 1.7 million from health services and delivery researchers and chief investigators. So that's a very large grant, which has now taken up almost my entire life for the last couple of years. But is also really, you know, a really important kind of learning opportunity and to kind of develop and strengthen your leadership skills. And again, I would say, you know, the way that I've found helpful to secure that is both building on your earlier successes, but also making sure that you're working with a strong team and the right team to support and deliver on that sort of a project. So through this, it's been about kind of strengthening skills, really kind of focusing critical effort, deciding where is the best place to kind of put your research time and endeavours. So earlier, I would say it was about diversifying and taking a range of opportunities. And at this stage, it's more about kind of focusing and having a kind of clear path forward, because it's quite easy to also get distracted and pulled into lots of different kind of projects and so on. And I think also kind of maintaining, you know, it's as you move into more of an academic role, it's really important to kind of ground your research and clinical practice. So keep closely linked in with what's happening clinically on the ground and what's happening and how service users are viewing the way that they're kind of accessing and using services as both being really, really important, certainly from an NIHR perspective, because you want to be able to be aware of what's actually happening clinically and in research and be able to understand where the gaps are that you're going to kind of move forward with. So there's a number of different projects that I've been working on. I just wanted to kind of flag a few. So this was the first research for patient benefit project that I secured back in 2010. The aim of it was around reducing disengagement from early intervention services, and it came directly out of experience of working in those services and consulting with service users. We had RDS support, patient and public involvement, small grant. We were successful with an RFPB project, and we've then moved on to the current HSDR project, which I've been running for the last 2 years. We've got over 25 co-applicants, over 10 trusts. Whoops. And we've the initial pilot project was had some successful outcomes in terms of reducing disengagement by about 10% and people feeling less isolated, more involved in their decision making as part of a service, and staff feeling that they had more pride and professionalism in their service because they had lots of really valuable and useful resources that they could draw on. Another project that I've been running is about improving uptake and implementation of CBT for psychosis, also funded by the RFPB, and initially has involved developing questionnaires to understand more about the issues around uptake and implementation of CBT, and then developing a sort of a platform for informed decision making that can be used by clinicians and service users. We've had, I think one of the really important things for me is making sure that your projects have impact and that they make a difference. And so we've had projects, so this is a project that that was about improving physical health outcomes for people with psychosis. And we won a Positive Practice Award for that. And this is just kind of an example of the sorts of activities that we're doing on the current project. So the early youth engagement project, the large HS&DR funded study, and the sorts of levels of complexity as you move into kind of larger projects. So in this project, we've started with a small scale study looking at implementation of the original intervention in Sussex. We've done a qualitative study to adapt resources for ethnic minorities. We're doing a very large randomized controlled trial, which actually now is involving 950 psychosis service users from around the country, looking at disengagement as the primary outcome. But we've also got a large cost effectiveness study and a process evaluation study, so that's looking at details of implementation. We've got lots of project partners that we've built along the way. And as I say, this is really important in enabling you to move forward. Sorry, I just need to get a drink. Okay. And as I say, it's also really important to be able to communicate really well about what you're aiming to do, what the intervention is, to make sure you have clinicians engaged with this and to produce resources that really make a difference. So top tips from my perspective would be to really look out for and take opportunities that are available to you, to be flexible and to be willing to kind of work at it kind of sometimes alongside your day job to kind of move forward initially. Being able to negotiate different ways of working and learn from and build contacts to strengthen your skills. And then as you move forward over time to really kind of focus your efforts on a key area of research, but make sure you're maintaining meaningful clinical and service user links and really focus on awareness raising. So you're really thinking about, and thinking about in terms of the project, think about the relevance of the project, the design, who the team are that you're going to be including, what the value and importance of this is and what impact it might have. So potential routes forward are, through a psychology PhD route, for example, is one option. I know Catherine talked about a number of others. Another really important way forward is through clinical psychology training. And I think it's really important to note that in the current climate, the BPS has noted that Health Education England are actually increasing the number of clinical psychology training places by 25%, which is a significant investment in clinical psychology for next year. And you have the option to build your research skills through that route as well. So really just wanted to kind of then open that up for more discussion, kind of, so who are you, where are you in your journey, to start to think about what opportunities you might have around you and what the variety of opportunities are to get involved. Start to think about where you might begin, what might a good research question be, how might I develop that, who might the team be and how might I find them? And to start to think about what you might think about in terms of a research grant. So those are some of the kind of areas you might think about, and similarly about a fellowship. So those are some kind of questions for consideration. And thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Kathy. And thank you both for sharing your experiences and your journeys and your top tips for us. I've got a couple of questions that I would like to put to you from the chat, if that's all right. So the first one is, I work full-time and I'm thinking about doing a PhD part-time, but there is not support from my service. Is this realistic? So I know, Catherine, you already did a bit in the chat. I don't know if you want to summarise that for people.
I put in the chat that I said no, I thought that was probably going to be overly ambitious. I think to be working full-time clinically and then trying to undertake a PhD in your evening and in the weekends, for example, would be incredibly difficult. And I think the point to remember that the purpose of the PhD is for research training. So if you're already working full-time clinically, the opportunities to pursue your research training are obviously greatly limited. So we put in the chat, Claire and myself, sort of alternative suggestions. Kathy's just put on her slides, opportunity for a PhD in psychology. So I think better to pursue opportunities either for your own PhD and pursuing your own funding, looking to PhDs that are offered by universities who will fund fees and will pay a stipend, looking for opportunities in research studies. As I said, the research study that I lead, we funded 5 PhDs on that through that research programme. So there are other ways to do it rather than trying to incorporate it alongside a full-time clinical.
I mean, the other thing, I think those are all really good points, and I definitely completely agree that you can't work full-time and do a part-time PhD without one of them failing. I think, you know, a PhD, the way to think about a PhD is that it is designed to be something that is, if you were doing it full-time, it would be your full-time job. And more potentially. So a part-time obviously is going to be half of that. I think, you know, the couple of things I would say is, just following on from Catherine's point, I think there are research projects that you could, I think it's always difficult going from a fully paid staff post into a PhD studentship, because the amount you get as a PhD stipend is a lot lower. Even if it's a funded post. Sometimes you can get a role on a research project where actually you're working on the research project, but you have a part of that that's your own research question, and then you get a bit of time to do your PhD alongside managing a research project. So that's another opportunity, and then you're getting paid in a role, but you're also able to do a PhD alongside. The other thing I would possibly be tempted to do is have another conversation with your team about, you know, the possibility of a shared post whereby you work part-time and somebody else takes, you know, your role part-time. I've definitely done that on multiple occasions and negotiated a half a day a week initially, a day a week, half-time, in order that I can then continue to do the research alongside. So I think that's the other thing I would say is there any scope to go back and kind of revisit that conversation and think about ways that it could move forward in a way that you feel fulfilled?
Lovely, great. Thank you very much. And we'll be putting together these responses and sending them out to everyone, so you'll get this as well. The other question we had was, it was specifically aimed at you, Kathy, because it was asking about clinical psychologists, but I think it can be generalized to any clinical role. And the question is, what are your tips for qualified clinical psychologists, or I guess clinicians in general, in terms of securing and building connections to research projects or universities and academics if you don't have a PhD?
not having a PhD doesn't matter at all. I know a number of people who've gone into a research career without a PhD. I mean, one particular case in point that springs to mind was my own supervisor when I first started clinical training, who basically had, he supervised me for 6 months as his first ever trainee, and then went straight into, I think he got an MRC fellowship, but you don't need a PhD to go into research, as long as you've got, you know, you've got some skills in that area, and you can kind of build some links, and you know, as Catherine was saying, start to write some papers. So if you've already done your clinical psychology doctorate, then try and make sure you've written up your paper or papers from it. People do an awful lot by supervising clinical psychology trainees. So that's another thing that you could do, is actually link up with one of the local clinical psychology training programs. And that's quite a nice starting opportunity for you to be able to take on a trainee and supervise their final year project. And you take, I mean, Salomons, for example, they have a project presentation or kind of meeting every year, where people who are interested in supervising can put in an application and go along and kind of meet potential interested candidates, and you get to partner up with somebody from the training course who works with you. So that's a really good way of doing things. The other thing to do is to link in with your local research department. If you're, I don't know if you're in this Sussex partnership or elsewhere, but link up with your R&D department and see if there are any projects that are on the horizon that might be of interest that you could be the PI on, for example. And then you're kind of, you start to build links. And as I say, I've led on projects where I wasn't involved in the original generation of the project, but I have offered to run that project locally. And it tends not to take too much of your time, maybe kind of an hour or maybe an hour or two a week, sometimes less depending on the project. But then you start to link in with other people around the country who are doing research in areas that are kind of relevant to you. So not the RDS. I think the RDS is relevant to developing your own project ideas, and that's another really fantastic way of taking things forward. If you've got a project idea yourself, going along and talking to your research design service can help you to really think, then how can this kind of, you know, develop some momentum? Who else could you link in with? How could you take the project forward? And if you've got funding, that is a really strong way of then being able to reduce some of your clinical time and take more time to do the project, but also go along to your research and development department in the NHS, who are hosting all of the research projects and may have projects, you know, that you could take a lead on locally.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm just desperately writing notes as well so that I can send it all out to everyone. Catherine, I wonder if you have some tips for nurses or for other sort of clinical areas who don't have a PhD and are wondering how to make those links.
I think, as Kathy said, I think the site PI role is really important. I think it is an opportunity to begin to learn more about research, as an opportunity to build networks with researchers in your area of interest. And the NHS research and delivery teams will be delighted that they've got clinical staff coming forward who are expressing an interest in research, looking for opportunities to pursue that. I also think things within your own sort of professional bodies as to you know, your sort of clinical area of interest in other people who are leading work on that, following them on Twitter, reading their publications. If you're going to professional conferences, for example, or regional meetings for AHPs or nurses, to use that as opportunities to approach people who might well be speaking. You know, it is all about...
It's a really good idea as well, yeah.
knowing your field, knowing your area of interest, knowing who is already pursuing questions in that, and then talking to them. And people are quite, often delighted if you, direct message them on Twitter, or if you introduce yourself at a conference. People are interested in building research capacity. That is very much the role of an academic, a clinical academic. So we're always on the lookout for developing, the next generation, who will be the next leaders in our respective field, who's going to continue work that we're interested in, who's going to be asking the next important question.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you. I don't think there are any other questions in the chat at the moment. But everybody, if things occur to you afterwards, when we circulate the slides and the videos, if other things occur, please do feel free to get in touch either with us at the RDS, or kindly Kathy and Catherine have offered to be available as well. So thank you.
Before we go, Claire, can I just make a quick suggestion that everybody just puts on their video cameras, and we can just take a picture of everybody who's on the call? I'm aware on Zoom, if we put it in gallery view, so if everyone could just put on their cameras, it would just be really nice to see everybody.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming.
And then I don't know, Anya, can you take a photo? Have you put it on gallery view and then you can just see everybody?
Yeah, I can do a screenshot when everyone's up.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then it means that we can tweet that, would just be really nice.
I'll wait for a few more people to pop up.
I'm aware people might not want to, so that's...
No, that's fine, absolutely.
Yeah, if anyone doesn't want to, obviously don't.
It's just quite nice for us that we've been talking just to see video of people.
Here you go. I shall send it in the chat.
Lovely. I've just got a few more, just to wrap it up, I'm just going to share my screen with everyone, if that's all right. Just a few points of where you can get support. So obviously we talked a lot about NIHR funding, so their website is really good. As has been mentioned, the research office, if you're an academic or you're academically based at the moment, the research office in your university. If you're in the NHS, the R&D, the Research and Development Office in your trust, and as people have said, being a site PI for a portfolio study is a great place to get that research experience, no matter what your background is. So I think they will be delighted to have you on board. Just to
they'll also help you as well, so people you will get some advice. So don't.
And you get research training, and it's a really good way of understanding the whole research process to actually be able to deliver a study. And then just to flag out that if you are attached to Brighton and Sussex University's Hospitals Trust, Sussex Partnership, University of Sussex, or Brighton and Sussex Medical School, your contact will be the Joint Clinical Research Office, and their details are there. A couple of other places that are useful potentially are the Clinical Research Network. Our one is in Kent, Surrey and Sussex, but they are around the country if you're elsewhere. And also, if you are thinking about a clinical trial, we haven't really touched on methodologies, but a clinical trials unit. And again, there's a couple of local examples, but there are clinical trials units throughout the country. And then finally, us at the Research Design Service. So we're the Research Design Service South East. We cover Kent, Surrey and Sussex, but because we are the South East, it is just for researchers in Kent, Surrey and Sussex, but there will be similar initiatives wherever you're located. But do please, if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, have a look and make your booking. Our next one is next week on the 24th, again over lunchtime. So I think if anyone else have a last question or comment? If not, thank you so much for coming. You'll be getting the full slide set, the video links, an evaluation form. So please, if you've enjoyed this session, give us some good feedback, would be much appreciated. And yes, see you later on. Thank you very much.
All right.